The screams of the tortured human child echoed through the galaxy as her life was snuffed out, her final moments broadcast for all to see, a warning from the Wadi to those who would oppose them. Joshua Morales, a grizzled veteran of the Human-Wadi War, stood at attention before the Galactic Council, barely able to contain his rage. Xenos, the Wadi representative, sneered at him as he recounted the gruesome details of the child's death, the clicking of his mandibles like nails on a chalkboard to Joshua's ears. Joshua's fists clenched, his knuckles turning white as he fought the urge to leap across the room and rip Xenos limb from limb. But he knew that violence here would solve nothing. The Council, a group of supposed peacekeepers, had once again failed to act, refusing to punish the Wadi for their atrocities. Instead, they turned to Joshua, the human representative, with a shocking demand. "Humanity must destroy the Wadi threat once and for all," the head counselor said, her voice cold and calculating. "We know of an ancient human fleet, far larger and more powerful than anything the galaxy has seen. Find it, reactivate it, and use it to wipe the Wadi from existence." Joshua's eyes widened in disbelief. The fleet they spoke of was a relic from the height of human expansion, vanishing centuries ago after the collapse of the old empire. Why was the Council only now revealing its existence? "Where was this fleet when we needed it?" Joshua demanded, his voice shaking with barely contained fury. "Where was the Council when the Wadi were slaughtering our people?" The Councillor's expression remained impassive. "The Wadi have been bribing us for decades to look the other way, but now their power has grown too great, and they threaten our own authority. You will do as we command, or humanity will face the consequences." Joshua felt sick to his stomach, disgusted by the Council's hypocrisy. But he saw in their demand a chance for vengeance, a way to make the Wadi pay for every innocent life they had taken. He straightened his shoulders, meeting the Councillor's gaze with a look of pure determination. "I'll find the fleet," he said, his voice hard as steel. "And when I do, the Wadi will learn what it means to face the full might of humanity. We will avenge our fallen, and the galaxy will tremble at our fury." Joshua left the Galactic Council chambers with a burning drive to avenge his fallen brothers and sisters. The sobs and screams of that poor girl the Wadi tortured to death echoed in his skull, fueling his rage. He had a mission, and nothing would stop him from finding that lost human fleet. His search led him to a rundown space station at the ass end of the galaxy, home to Zach, a scumbag information trader. Joshua had history with this weasel. Zach had once sold intel to the Wadi that got an entire human colony wiped out. Joshua swore if he ever saw Zach's face again, he'd put a plasma bolt through it. Joshua entered a grimy dive bar and spotted Zach immediately, lounging in a corner booth surrounded by roughneck bodyguards. The stench of cheap booze and stale sweat hung in the air. Joshua walked right up, his hand resting on his blaster. Zach's goons tensed, hands creeping toward their own weapons. "Joshua Morales, I expected I'd be seeing you soon," Zach said with a smirk, taking a swig of his drink. "Nasty business with that girl. My condolences." "Cut the shit, Zach. You know why I'm here," Joshua growled. "Of course. You need to find that old human fleet, and it just so happens I know where it is. But that information won't come cheap." Joshua leaned in, his face inches from Zach's. "You're lucky I don't just blast you and take what I need." Zach chuckled. "Please, if you could do that, you would have already. You need me, so let's talk price." Joshua's stomach churned with disgust, but he was out of options. "Fine, name it." After haggling over the price, Joshua transferred the credits. Zach slid a data chip across the table. "The fleet is in the Forgotten Nebula. Those coordinates and codes will get you in. But I should warn you, no one who's ventured into that sector has ever come back out. It's a one-way trip." Joshua pocketed the chip and turned to go. Zach called after him, "You know, if you'd come to me earlier, maybe that little girl would still be breathing. Guess you'll have to live with that, huh?" Joshua froze, rage surging through his veins. His hand twitched toward his blaster. He ached to put a searing hole right between Zach's eyes, but he fought down the urge. Too much was at stake. He had a job to do. Without another word, he strode out of the bar, leaving Zack and his scum behind. Joshua boarded his ship, the Retribution, and punched in the coordinates Zack had given him. The engines roared to life as he blasted off, pushing the throttle to maximum. Stars streaked past the cockpit windows as he hurtled through hyperspace, the weight of his mission heavy on his shoulders. The Retribution shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Forgotten Nebula. Joshua's eyes widened at the sight before him. A roiling mass of gas and dust shot through with arcs of crackling energy. His sensors immediately began to malfunction, readings fluctuating wildly. "Shit," Joshua muttered, gripping the controls tighter. He knew navigating this nebula would take every ounce of his piloting skills. He plunged the Retribution into the maelstrom, the ship bucking and jolting as energy storms buffeted its hull. Joshua gritted his teeth, fighting to keep the ship on course. Sweat beaded on his brow as he wove through the tempest, narrowly avoiding swirling vortexes that threatened to tear the ship apart. Just as he thought he'd made it through the worst of it, a massive surge of energy slammed into the Retribution. Sparks flew from consoles as systems overloaded and fried. The ship spun out of control, alarms blaring. Joshua hauled on the controls, but they were unresponsive. Through the viewport, he saw a planet looming, rushing up to meet him at a terrifying speed. With a desperate heave, he wrenched the emergency thrusters online, fighting to level out the ship's descent. The Retribution hit the planet's surface hard, skidding and bouncing, metal shrieking as it tore away. When the ship finally shuddered to a halt, Joshua hung limply in his harness, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. He fumbled with the buckles, dragging himself from the wreckage on unsteady legs. As he stumbled away from the smoking ruin of his ship, a group of figures emerged from the haze. They were unlike any beings Joshua had ever seen, tall and slender, their forms shimmering with an inner light. They approached him cautiously, and Joshua tensed, his hand drifting towards his blaster. "Hold, human," one of them said, its voice resonating in Joshua's mind. "We mean you no harm. We are the Eridani, guardians of this place." Joshua's eyes widened. The Eridani. He'd thought them nothing more than a myth. "We sense the burden you carry," another Eridani said. "The fleet you seek, we have guarded it for centuries, awaiting one worthy to claim it." Hope surged in Joshua's chest, but the Eridani held up a hand. "But worthiness must be proven. You must face the trials, human. Only then can the fleet be yours." Joshua straightened, ignoring the pain lancing through his body. "I'll face whatever trials I need to. I have to, for the sake of the galaxy." The Eridani led Joshua to a vast chamber, its walls pulsing with energy. There they subjected him to test after grueling test, pushing his body and mind to their limits. Joshua strained, muscles burning, thoughts racing as he fought to overcome each challenge. Days blurred together, exhaustion dragging at Joshua's every step. But he refused to yield. The faces of the dead drove him onward. The girl the Wadi had murdered, his fallen comrades, the countless innocents crying out for justice. Finally battered and drained, Joshua stood before the Eridani elders. They regarded him solemnly, and for a long moment, silence reigned. Then the lead elder nodded. "You have proven yourself, Joshua Morales. The fleet is yours. Use it well, and may the stars guide your path." As the elders led him to the hangar where the ancient ships lay waiting, Joshua's heart raced. These vessels were magnificent, sleek, and deadly, thrumming with barely restrained power. With these under his command, the Wadi would face a reckoning like none before. Joshua smiled grimly, a fire kindling in his eyes. It was time to bring the fight to the enemy, to make them pay for every drop of human blood they'd spilled. The Wadi had sown the seeds of their destruction, and now, at long last, it was humanity's turn to reap the bitter harvest. Joshua gripped the controls of his flagship, the Retribution II, as it surged through the void. The ancient fleet he had claimed from the Eridani moved as one behind him, an awe-inspiring sight of gleaming metal and thrumming power. He opened a comm channel, broadcasting to the Galactic Council. "This is Joshua Morales. I have the fleet. The Wadi's days are numbered." He cut the link before they could respond. They'd done nothing while the Wadi slaughtered innocents. Now they would watch as humanity cleaned up their mess. As the fleet approached Wadi space, proximity alarms blared. The view screen filled with a swarm of Wadi ships, a vast armada bristling with weapons. At their center, the massive form of Xenos' flagship loomed. "All ships engage!" Joshua roared. The battle erupted, a maelstrom of flashing beams and exploding hulls. Joshua flew like a man possessed, the Retribution 2 dancing through the Wadi fire, its ancient weapons tearing through their shields like paper. Around him, the human fleet carved a path of destruction, their superior technology and Joshua's tactical brilliance turning the tide. Wadi ships splintered and burst, their crews sucked into the pitiless vacuum. Yet even as his forces dwindled, Xenos stood firm, his flagship pouring unrelenting fire into the human ranks. Joshua gritted his teeth, plotting a course directly for the heart of the enemy. "Prepare boarding parties," he commanded. "We're taking this fight to Xenos." With a bone-shaking impact, the Retribution 2 slammed into the flagship's hull, disgorging heavily armed human soldiers into the enemy ship. At their head strode Joshua, his eyes alight with righteous fury. Wadi warriors swarmed to meet them, and the corridors became a bloody melee of flashing blades and searing plasma. Joshua fought like a demon, his every blow fueled by the memory of the child the Wadi had butchered. He carved a path to the bridge, his armor scorched and dented, his face spattered with alien blood. There he found Xenos waiting, the Wadi leader's mandibles flexed in a sneer. "So the human whelp comes to die," Xenos hissed, drawing a crackling energy blade. Joshua answered with a wordless roar, launching himself at his foe. They clashed in a whirlwind of strikes, blades sparking, armor shattering. Xenos was strong and fast, his exoskeleton turning aside blows that would fell a lesser being. But Joshua was driven by more than skill or strength. The faces of the dead cried out for vengeance, and he would not be denied. With a final, desperate lunge, he knocked Xenos' blade aside and bore the alien to the ground. He raised his fist, ready to end it, but hesitated. The child's face flashed before his eyes, her terrified sobs echoing in his ears. Could he be better than this? Could he end the cycle of blood? Xenos saw his hesitation and laughed, a harsh clicking sound. "I killed that child," he spat, ichor flecking his mandibles, "and I enjoyed it, just like I'll enjoy killing you." Something snapped in Joshua. There could be no mercy for such evil, no redemption for those who reveled in innocent suffering. With a howl of rage, he brought his fist down again and again until Xenos moved no more. The Wadi fleet, seeing their leader fall, broke and fled. Joshua slumped over the ruined corpse of his foe, the fire in his veins turning to ash. He returned to the council, the fleet at his back, and stood before them in triumph. Yet as they praised him, all he felt was a hollow ache. So much death, so much pain, and for what? He made his decision then. He would not return the fleet. He would not let it fall into the hands of those who had stood by while atrocity reigned. Instead, he would take it beyond the bounds of known space, along with any humans who wished to follow. The council blustered and threatened, but in the end they yielded. None dared stand against the victor of the Wadi war. As the fleet prepared to depart, Joshua looked out at the stars, their cold light holding no comfort. The war was won, but the scars it left would never fade. All he could do was press on and hope that somewhere out in the vast reaches of the universe they could find a way to heal, to build something better from the ashes of their pain. The engines roared to life, and the fleet leapt forward, hurtling into the unknown. Joshua closed his eyes, the weight of the future heavy on his shoulders. The path ahead was dark and uncertain, but they would walk it together, unbroken and unbowed. The years passed in a blur as Joshua and his followers ventured further into the uncharted reaches of the galaxy. They settled on a lush, verdant planet, far from the machinations of the corrupt Galactic Council. Here, They built a new society, founded on the principles of justice, equality, and the protection of the innocent. Joshua, his hair now grey and his face lined with the wisdom of age, served as a guiding light for his people. He led with a steady hand, always striving to uphold the ideals that had driven him to lead his people into the unknown. One day a strange signal pierced the tranquility of their settlement. Joshua, in the midst of a council meeting, froze as the distress call echoed through the chamber. It was a plea for help, from a race unknown to the humans. The council erupted into debate. Some argued that they should ignore the call, that getting involved could only lead to more bloodshed. But Joshua, his heart still driven by the need to protect the innocent, convinced them that they had a moral obligation to investigate. With trepidation, the human fleet set out towards the source of the signal. As they dropped out of hyperspace, a scene of utter devastation greeted them. The planet below, once teeming with life, now lay in ruins. Cities had been reduced to rubble, and the charred remains of the planet's inhabitants littered the surface. And there, hovering above the carnage like vultures, was a sight that made Joshua's blood run cold. A fleet of ships, bearing the unmistakable markings of the Wadi. Joshua's mind reeled. The Wadi were supposed to have been defeated, their power broken by the sacrifices of Joshua and his comrades all those years ago. Yet here they were, once again bringing death and destruction to the innocent. With a heavy heart, Joshua gave the order to engage. The human fleet, their skills honed by years of training and vigilance, leapt into battle. But something was different. The Wadi ships were more advanced, their weapons more powerful. Their tactics were more ruthless, more brutal than ever before. It quickly became clear that in the years since their defeat, the Wadi had not been idle. They had been rebuilding in secret, honing their skills and nurturing their hatred for the humans who had humiliated them. The battle was fierce and bloody. Joshua's fleet fought with everything they had, but the Wadi's onslaught was relentless. Ships exploded into fiery balls of debris, the screams of the dying filling the comms. In the end, the humans emerged victorious, but at a terrible cost. Many of Joshua's closest friends and allies had fallen, their lives snuffed out in an instant. His own ship, the Retribution Thumantu, was badly damaged, its hull scorched and pitted by enemy fire. As Joshua surveyed the ruins of the planet, he felt a grim realization settle over him like a shroud. The Wadi's evil had not been eradicated, merely set back. They would continue to prey on the weak and the innocent, as long as they existed. With a heavy heart, Joshua gave the order he had hoped he would never have to give. Using the ancient fleet's most powerful weapons, a legacy of humanity's darkest days, they unleashed a devastating strike on the Wadi homeworld. In an instant, the planet was obliterated. The Wadi race, once the scourge of the galaxy, was wiped out in a heartbeat. Joshua watched the destruction unfold, his face a mask of stone. He knew that this act would haunt him forever. He had become what he hated, a bringer of genocide. The weight of the lives he had taken, even in the name of protecting the innocent, settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. But he also knew that it had been necessary. The Wadi would have continued their reign of terror, leaving a trail of blood and suffering in their wake. By ending them, Joshua had saved countless lives. On the long journey back to their home, Joshua stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the stars. He had won a great victory, but at the cost of his soul. He wondered if the cycle of violence would ever end, if there would ever be true peace in a universe filled with such cruelty. But he knew one thing for certain. As long as he lived, he would continue to fight for the innocent. He would be their shield, their protector against the darkness, even if it meant becoming a monster himself. Joshua turned away from the viewport, his steps heavy as he walked towards his quarters. There was much to be done, and little time for rest. The universe was a harsh and unforgiving place, and the fight was far from over. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.